Well, welcome to Homeline Academy channel. My name is Godfrey Chazé. I'm your educator here. I'm your teacher. I'm a homeschool dad, and as well, I'm an advocate for home education here in Uganda or at large on the African continent. And in today's episode, we want to begin right away by defining what is this thing called homeschooling. Well, by many people, it is referred to by many terminologies. Some call it homeschooling, others call it home education, others call it parent-directed education. Whatever we may call it, if we are to define what homeschooling is, I would use three parameters. I would say homeschooling is home-based education, it is parent-led education, and at the same time it is private education. Private education in the sense that it is not state-managed education. It's not the government or public education as we may know it. And why is it parent-led? It's parent-led in the sense that it's not the education system that is based on a professional in the sense that there has to be a teacher. But here we are talking about an education where the parent of the child is the person who is directly responsible for the teaching and the learning of what their children are supposed to learn. Now, yes, I understand it does not mean that the parent is going to stand before their child and teach everything the child needs to learn. But at least what we mean here is that the parent is responsible. If it means to outsource an expert who is going to do the teaching, still it remains the parent's responsibility. And it is home-based education in the sense that it is not necessarily an institutionalized education system where the child has to be taken to a brick and mortar school somewhere, but it is home-based. And that does not necessarily mean that the children are locked up in the four walls of their house 24/7, but it is whatever they call home. A home is, yes, a place where we live, but a home is a place where we are working from. A home is a place where we find ourselves as a family. And wherever that happens, we are trying to suggest that education can happen everywhere. And basically, or in a nutshell, I would say that's what homeschooling is. Home-based, parent-led, and private education. What's the background of homeschooling? I know many people, especially here in Uganda or in Africa, could say that this is a new phenomenon. But I want to suggest that it is not actually new. If you look at our education system, we can break it into three phases. There is what we may call the African traditional education system. Then formal education came to the coming of missionaries, so there is what we may call missionary education system. And then what we know today as public education or government-run education. Now, African traditional education system was the kind that took place until 1877 when the missionaries came in the country and they started the formal schools. But prior to the missionaries coming, what we had is what I would categorize as home-based education, because it was home-based, it was community-based, it was parent-led, and it was private education. So when we talk about homeschooling today, it's more or less a renaissance of what used to happen before formal education came into the country. And that's what is happening not just in Uganda, but in many parts of the world. People are beginning to rediscover the values of that education system. Informal as it was, there were so many values that we would love to see that we can bring back in today's society. So I would say that yes, the background of homeschooling, you could say, is new in the recent years. Most people, I think, got to hear about the term during COVID-19. But even here in our own country, before COVID-19, there are people who had homeschooled for quite a number of years. I could say about 20 years or 15 years. There are people in this country who have been homeschooling. Now, you would say, are there people who are known who have been homeschooled in this country? Oh, yes. For purposes of referencing, those of you who want facts that you can go and reference, there was an article in The Observer in 2014 by a gentleman called Mwesige S. I think it's Stephen Mwesige. He writes an article which was entitled Why Parents Homeschool. And in this article, he mentions two key names of graduates, people who had completed school and they had been homeschooled all throughout. And this was one young lady who was the winner of Coca-Cola Rated Next Season 2. I think her name was Ruth Grace Namatovu. She was homeschooled. So there are a number of other people I know, families I know, whose children are now graduates, who are engineers. I know filmmakers. I know people who are in different sectors in this country, but they were homeschooled when it came to primary and secondary education. They only went to universities. In other words, homeschooling is something that has been happening even in our country, and it is coming back, at least in a new way. Are there countries which we can glean from where homeschooling has been happening for quite some time, or where it is even legal? Oh, yes. Of course, we can mention the United States of America. All the 50 states, homeschooling is legalized. There are so many parents who are homeschooling. I mean, when you look at statistics in the US, they are talking about 8 million young people who are being homeschooled. Of course, in Canada, in the UK, in UAE, in Australia, all those countries have homeschooling recognized in their education system. On the African continent, we can talk about South Africa. It is actually legalized. It is within their law. Here in Eastern Africa, in Uganda, if we have about 600 families who are homeschooling, in Kenya, they could be about 5,000 families who are homeschooling. It's bigger there, much as the law in Kenya and in Uganda is almost similar when it comes to homeschooling. Apart from countries like Germany and China, that's where I know where homeschooling is not legal, where actually it's criminalized. But there are so many countries in the world today where homeschooling is a phenomenon that they are encouraging, where parents who are able to do it, they are not criminalized, but instead they are encouraged to do this because it has so many benefits, like we are going to see in the many other episodes that I will be doing. Please, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this platform, Homeline Academy, our YouTube channel, where we shall be sharing all these things, all this information about homeschooling. What is it? Why do people do it? If you want to homeschool, where do you find resources? Where do you find materials? All of those are things that I want to bring to you. And I want to say again, my name is Godfrey Chaze, the teacher here, who is willing, who has invested time in looking up this information to share it with you. Please look out for our next episode where we shall be talking about why do people homeschool. Thank you very much.